So, gay Russians. You know, I didn't really think that my first sort of analysis video would be this kind of topic, but it's me, and so we're gonna go this route. There is something I've wanted to talk about for a very, very long time, a very deep hyperfixation of mine. This being the comic Major Grom, as well as its spin-off, Plague Doctor, and then every other spin-off that they keep doing because it's a comic and that's just the nature of comics, I suppose. Before I get into this, make sure to subscribe and like and do all that usual stuff. Maybe check out the Patreon so I can keep animating stuff. Anyway, for my final year of university, I studied 2D animation, and what I wrote an analysis on for my thesis was queer themes, identity, and their depiction within Russian comics, Major Grom. Which, in more simpler terms, is basically how my ship is canon in Major Grom. Queerness has had many depictions throughout media, ranging from good to bad to alright, but very rarely do we see it within Russian media. And well, I wouldn't necessarily champion this ship as like the peak representation for gay representation, but it's probably the best they can do under the circumstances that they're in with their own rules and regulations in regards to media. Now, is Serovolk, the ship, necessarily healthy? No, I would not say so. Is it extremely interesting? Yes, I would say so. So what is Major Grom? Major Grom is a comic published by Bubble Comics in 2012 in Russia. It's Russia's only publishing house that produces original comics that don't extend from pre-existing franchises, and they sort of focus on creating their own characters, though they've made it very clear that they don't want to be called Russia's Marvel, essentially. But, that's the closest thing we can sort of adjacent with. It is a huge company, and they have their own conventions and things. It's pretty cool. And they have a huge array of characters in comics, the most popular one being Major Grom, at least from what I can perceive. Major Grom was among Bubble's first comics. It is a comic which focuses on the character Igor Grom, a confident and rather cocky Russian policeman, and Major, following his adventures in St. Petersburg as he investigates various crimes and takes down different villains. In the beginning, it's sort of very generic, like a slightly propaganda type show. Well, comic. And, Grom is this sort of super macho, like, badass. He can defeat any villain, which is what makes the character that I wish to talk about today so interesting as the very queer-coded evil character of the series, Sergei Razumovsky. The two of them sort of function as, they sort of have like a Batman Joker-esque dynamic, But this sort of macho depiction, this sort of very one-note character, did not continue on as the series grew. Sergei is a very fascinating character as the major antagonist of the first few arcs of Major Grom. His perception was sort of changed when the series became more empathetic towards him and his background. Mind you, he's still a terrible person. This guy's a serial killer. But what he stands for is extremely interesting, and, some people can sympathize a lot more with him. Sergei is basically a young gay Mark Zuckerberg. He was someone who was orphaned at a very young age, with little explanation, at least until now, as to why that was. He grew up alone, aside from his one friend, Oleg Volkov. I'll get to him in a second. And worked his way up to the top, creating a social media called Vmest, which means together in English. And basically what it allowed for was a privatization of all data, and it's pretty cool actually. Sergei's goal was to take billionaires down a peg and make sure they weren't controlling everything. But that also depends on if you believe the film canon or the original canon, because it gets wishy-washy and confusing a little bit. That's something you've just got to keep in mind throughout the series. Sergei becomes a serial killer called the Plague Doctor in order to kill certain billionaires he believes has abused their power, and it sort of spirals into this massive, power trip. And then it's also later revealed that he has an evil alter ego, so, I wouldn't say it's not a good representation of, DID, okay? Do not enter this series thinking that you're gonna get good rep for DID, that's not the case. At least, not at the beginning, it sort of changed a little bit later. But yeah, he has this evil persona called the Bird, which doesn't entirely dictate all of his evil actions. But, again, we're referencing early canon right now, so we can say that. The Bird honestly deserves his own video because he is kind of... he's evil, but he's also kind of, in some ways sympathetic. He exists to sort of help Sergei in a lot of ways, and helps him also, essentially, take his revenge on Grom for getting him in prison. But who is it exactly that frees him from prison? And this is where we get to the beginning of the video. Oleg Volkov is another character in Major Grom, and is the person who shows up to rescue Sergei from prison when summoned. And who is this man in relation to Sergei? Oh yes, it is his childhood bestie. Oleg is a mercenary who used to be a soldier. He's someone who left Sergei to sort of go fight, because, well, he was struggling on his university career path, so fair enough. Him and Sergei have a very close bond. They grew up together and protected each other when they were kids. They've both saved each other numerous times, and they have a sort of very tragic arc. A very long situationship, if you will. It is very heavily implied, and sometimes even outright stated, that these two are canon. It wasn't quite necessarily this way at the beginning of the first arc where Oleg appears, the game, in Volume 5. But as time went on, and as the ship seemed to gain popularity, there was a lot more allusions to them being more than just childhood best friends. I mean, even in the game itself, the fact that in the Death Chess game, which is basically a game where Sergei would assign electric collars to every single one of Grom's loved ones and then his own staff. And, you know, their significance being represented by a piece. Oleg, much like the main guy's love interest, Yulia, was assigned to the Queen, the closest to Sergei, which is very interesting, I think. But, you know, I'm going to get into these reasonings in a little bit. Oleg sort of starts like a guard dog guy, you know, always defending his evil villain guy. And then you sort of see in the more tender moments, he tends to be more present. Those moments where Sergei's having, like, breakdowns and things, and he seems to know how to comfort him, or he seems to be at least familiar with this sort of behavior. But that alone isn't enough to sort of, you know, prove my ship to be canon. The two are often depicted to be closer than just guard dog and boss. I mean, they are childhood friends after all. But they do a lot of things that might lean a little more romantic-centric. You know, like drinking wine and going to Venice together to sort of enact their evil plans together. Reminiscing on the things that they wanted to do. It's also things like how Sergei gets flustered when Oleg shows concern, or, you know, and then he immediately sort of pulls it back as the bird persona comes back. In the bonus art of Volume 5, there's a lot of domestic stuff depicted with those two. And it can also be noted from a narrative perspective how much emphasis on Yulia in Grom's arc, his girlfriend, in the game, and how it parallels Sergei's arc, which focuses on Oleg and his struggle with the bird, and sort of how one represents humanity and one represents his downfall. The bird does not like Oleg. He tries to kill the man at every chance he goddamn gets. And he succeeds. At the end of the game, Oleg gets shot by the bird, sort of. Sergei tries not to do it, but is sort of semi-controlled by him, and it's the first time he really sort of trembles when holding the gun. And thus, the joke of 6 bullets originates. Though interestingly, Oleg is the only character to really come back in regards to love interest. When Grom's love interest, Yulia, dies, that's it, she's gone forever, like she doesn't come back, she's just dead. And from this point on, after killing so many people, and losing what is essentially the only thing that really mattered to him, Sergei is not the same through the end of the series. He sort of lets the bird take over. Even in the series, when he's asked to fully embrace the bird and become a vessel for this demon thing, this whole arc called, I think it's like Time of the Raven or something, Sergei just looks broken and he just lets it happen. He's lost everything, like what is there left to lose? And for a while we don't really hear much about Sergei as we focus on Grom's descent into madness as he processes the death of his friends and his lover, and how to sort of move forward in life. And thus at the end of the series, which mind you ends very depressingly, which I didn't realize is sort of a trope within Russian media, until a bit later when we get some lovely spin-offs. Igor Grom and Plague Doctor. Plague Doctor is the sequel that we're going to be talking about, and it's still an ongoing comic that I haven't caught up with due to, well, I mean, you know, our country isn't exactly on good terms with Russian right now, so we're not getting many English translations. Regardless, I've sort of managed to get my hands on some physical copies of the newer issues, as well as, with the help of some Russian friends, translate some parts of the comic. This will be a little bit of a mess of references because I've had to compile things via half-translated PDFs, Twitter screenshots, because, well, the Bubble comic site doesn't really run in the UK anymore. So it's a little trickier for me to access the original files, which is a shame. So, Plague Doctor. This takes place a few years after the end of Major Grom. It focuses on Sergei and Oleg, who is alive and doing fine, I guess, and how Sergei wants to try and fix his original plan of making a plague doctor and bring a successor. The series sort of focuses on Sergei and Oleg's relationship, as well as our new protagonist, Lera, who is the new plague doctor, someone who's much more reasonable than Sergei and might begin a descent into being a lot more like him. The series also aims to deal with Sergei's guilt over the things he did in the game and the actions he took against Oleg, and sort of trying to fix and define what his relationship with Oleg is. At the beginning of the series, the two sort of act very comfortably with each other, even kind of flirting in some pages when they're training together. And it might not necessarily imply a romantic dynamic, but it can definitely be read with flirty undertones. You know, words like, don't get distracted when they're fighting together. In later issues, Oleg is kidnapped in order to draw out Sergei, and for the first time, we sort of see him nervous again within the series since the game. He's often a very overconfident guy, and he's genuinely concerned for Oleg's well-being. Before, he had no issue with discarding people who were just, little grunts for him. But Oleg, this is a big deal. This is his best friend, his childhood bestie, and he still feels guilt for killing him in the first place. This whole situation results in a fight where Sergei is able to save Oleg just about, and sort of drag Lera out as well. It also results in them both having matching X scars. Sergei has the one on his chest from the first comic of Major Grom, from when Grom slices him, and from this mission, Oleg gets one on his back, because of Sergei's actions. So they're sort of tied in the symbolic sense too. Now, beyond this point, this is where the plausible deniability sort of ends to me. Most notably within the scenes following Sergei getting severely injured after an encounter with an antagonist, whom, much like Sergei, is heavily queer-coded as well. For some reason, St. Petersburg just has, a bunch of gay villains running around, which seems to be an ongoing joke in the series. When he returns to the apartment, a recovering Oleg, who is still depicted as struggling because of the previous things that have happened, runs to Sergei and then gently holds him. The framing is very tender, as Oleg holds him under the arm and around the back, Sergei holding onto the crease of Oleg's arm. This scene is followed by a scene that made the fandom go completely insane, which is where Sergei is being bandaged by Oleg. Bandaging or helping a partner is a common trope within romantic stories. I mean, there's a reason why Hurt Comfort is so popular. And the two are sort of comforting each other, and it's a very tender portrayal of the two's interactions as they express concern and gentle touches. This is followed by a panel of the two gently holding hands as Sergei explains the situation he just endured. This section of the comic, they're sort of discussing what their relationship is and how they want to be to each other. And there's a panel that focuses on the gentleness of their hand-holding. And this feels a lot less subtle, especially as it's followed by a panel of the two embracing in a hug, talking about how they can't lose each other again, and will find a way to avoid it. It feels very unsubtle. And this is another thing that I should note, that I forgot to note earlier. So, Major Grom has a lot of artists, but two of the main artists, Fobs, also known as Anastasia Kim, and KSD, they are very much known for drawing, fruity gay ships. It's not... I just find it very interesting that the artists who draw Sergei and Oleg the most draw a lot of gay ships. If you look at their portfolio of work and their fan art that they do. And of course, as well, Fobs draws a lot of fan art of Serovolk, of them being canon. And whilst the artist doesn't dictate the story, they have influence. And I find it very interesting. I actually managed to commission one of the artists a while ago, Soeka, to draw my D&D OC. And, I'm very grateful that I was able to do that. But anyway, now, the final example I want to use primarily, and I haven't covered every single example because this series is long and there is a lot. One day I might do a full analysis of this series and, Serovolk as a whole. But in issue 31, the two are sort of implied to share a bed. This is shown by the less obvious detail, like their phones on each side of the bed, with the more, blatant details of the creases in the beds nearer to the door where Oleg's voice is coming from. It should be noted that Volkov always sleeps on the side nearest to the door, which is noted by some as the protective side. This is just a detail that was shown in issue 11, when Volkov was recovering in the bed too. There is also a lot of bubbles official art that just has them together like this, so I don't know. Take that as you will. I'm going to briefly speak about the movie, but not too much because I actually prefer the comics a lot more. And the movie canon is sort of debated on how canon it is, and canon constantly changes in this damn series, so here we go. I'm just gonna show you this clip and let me know what you think. For context, this clip was deleted and it is part of the movie, but it is a deleted scene, so yeah, take that as you will.
Здравствуй, Сереж. Значит, ради них ты был готов пожертвовать своей соцсетью, целым городом и даже нашей дружбой?
Что ты тут делаешь?
Присматриваюсь. Тоже хочешь, чтобы я убил их?
Это не смешно. Уходи.
Если хочешь, мы сделаем это вместе. Только ты и я.
Убирайся.
Хорошо. Как знаешь.
So, overall, what are we concluding about Serovolk as a ship or these characters? Are they canon, are they not? I think they are canon. In this interview they said this.
Что такое Serovolk как канон?
Наконец-то про Serovolk вопрос. Все, я готов. Давайте. Наташа, ты готова? Настя, ты готова? Давайте. Все, я ждал Сколько мы подкаст пишем? Давайте.
Некоторые воспринимают все-таки это именно как желание привлечь побольше шиперов непосредственно, да, тех, кто увлечен этим пэрингом. Либо это все-таки действительно что-то искреннее, вполне себе само собой разумеющееся.
Честно скажу, что это не желание привлечь шиперов, несмотря на то, что я сейчас вижу, это какое-то гигантское количество контента по Serovolk. Меня отмечают в Инстаграме, я Насте сегодня показывал, только на фотографиях с Сергеем, с Олегом, с Serovolk'ом, с комиксными артами. Это недавно болел, и у меня были галлюцинации, и у меня все галлюцинации были связаны только с Serovolk'ами, честно. Все это два персонажа в голове, постоянно сменяющиеся картинки какие-то. Реально, мне было плохо. Сейчас я не хочу, чтобы у меня ощущение того, что мне было плохо, ассоциировалось с этими персонажами. Просто рассказываю историю. И у меня только в голове был Serovolk, столько этого контента сейчас в моей жизни. Я не считаю, что это контент, который делается и создан для того, чтобы привлечь шиперов. Это история двух людей, которые реально друг без друга не способны существовать. В какой-то момент они существовали друг без друга, сейчас они существуют вместе, и вместе они должны быть, и это действительно так. Я не знаю, какими мыслями руководствовалась Настя, когда придумывала Олега, и Наташа, которая ей в этом активно помогала. Но сейчас, как бы для меня, я говорю сейчас опять свое личное мнение в данном случае, для меня Serovolk это канон, потому что в первую очередь это два персонажа, которые существуют в связке. Serovolk канон, потому что это Сергей и Олег, и они вместе, они существуют вместе, они не могут друг без друга, они помогают друг другу, они живут друг другом.
Я могу сказать, что я вкладываю искренние эмоции в сюжеты. В любые сюжеты. Я сейчас говорю не про Serovolk'ов, а говорю вообще вот про все, над чем я работаю. И как бы у меня нет вот этой вот коварной задачи злого создателя сказать, что типа, ну сделал и сделал, типа, эти съедят. И как бы нормально. И
внезапно у меня тоже нет, хотя я вроде человек, который должен думать о финансах.
То есть как бы, наверное, это как бы это эгоистично, но как бы делать что-то неискреннее я просто не могу.
Мы пытаемся для начала, я понимаю, что все от нас ждут сразу 18+, все, что нужно и так далее. Мы для начала... Мы пытаемся на зачаточном таком уровне, я понимаю, что сейчас все хотят сразу большего, резкого скачка, но на зачаточном уровне мы пытаемся привить людям мысль о том, что это нормально, что эти отношения это классно и нормально, и люди могут друг друга вот так поддерживать, так вместе с друг другом существовать, и совершенно неважно, какого пола эти люди, и в данном случае Serovolk...
Опять же, это не только Serovolk. У нас огромное количество персонажей с очень-очень разными моделями отношений. с огромным количеством разных моделей отношений. Как бы, и это все существует.
Поэтому что мы хотим? Мы хотим привить мысль для того, что это классно, это хорошо, это нормально. Да, я вот честно скажу, да, с моей точки зрения, да, это канон, это персонажи, которые действительно должны быть вместе и существуют вместе. Дальше в историях мы посмотрим и расскажем, как все это произойдет.
Просто
и что
есть
там
еще
дальше
такой
будет.
очень важный вопрос, насколько для репрезентуемой группы хорошо то, что мы показываем таким каноном убийцу и террориста. Мы что, хотим сказать, что в этой стране только убийцы и террористы могут быть репрезентуемой группой? Это тоже нужно обсуждать и как-то решить.
This interview got deleted a little while ago, but I still think what they said rings true to the series. Serovolk is not the best depiction of queer characters, but it is a fun depiction of queer villains. And I think you've got to proceed with this series with the mindset that there's a lot of censorship laws and you've got to kind of take what you can get in this regard. But if you like villains and if you like this sort of be evil together mentality, then I think you'll really enjoy Serovolk. Major Grom can be read on Webtoon for its first few arcs, and, well, you'll have to hunt a bit if you want to find the other paces. But it's definitely worth reading if you can get your hands on it. I really enjoy this series. I think a lot of people in the West would enjoy this series. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Serovolk. Maybe I'll do more videos in future. We'll see how this video does. So, as per usual, like and subscribe, support my Patreon if you can, and yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day.